Is it in your DNA or is it something else? I don't know. I didn't think through this intro at all. I just wanted to start with, is it in your DNA? And then my brain farted. Amy, hi.
Hi.
Hi. Today, we're going to be talking a little bit about DNA and specifically SNP testing, SNP testing. So this is like 23andMe and similar. So, Amy, who's the hot girl that everybody wants to talk about in this world?
I think probably the hottest one would be MTHFR. Is that what you're thinking?
Yes, she's the popular kid in school for sure. But you know what? I'm bored of talking about MTHFR because now, thanks to the single nutrient series that y'all should totally check out, we have a full episode on folate. We have a full episode on vitamin B12. And I'm pretty sure prior to the single nutrient series, we did an episode talking about MTHFR specifically, if I remember correctly. So for all that MTHFR is the cool kid in this world, I'm going to choose to not talk about her all that much, if that's okay with you.
Yeah.
I mean, we can mention her here or there.
Yes.
But I would like to start us off just by sharing this, is that with regards to this world, I have come full circle personally. And I think I've shared this in those episodes that there was a time from like probably 2015 to 2017 in my clinical practice where I was very enchanted by the SNP, DNA, 23andMe kind of stuff.
Nutrigenomic type stuff.
Yeah. Even that word sounds so cool.
Yeah.
Right. And like, I really fancied the idea of sometimes it's painted as precision medicine or like precision nutrition, right? Like, oh, don't follow the Mediterranean diet like those bunch of schmucks. You need a precision diet that's made for your genes, gosh darn it.
Whoa.
And it's tailored to you as an individual. And so I was taking a fair number of courses on this. I was in, all of the forums and trying to learn a lot more about this. I was looking up like the RS numbers and whatnot. I was putting together my own Livewellio panels that I was using to look at people's stuff. And I moved away from it after about a year or two because I noticed I was not getting clinical results. I was following the protocols. I was doing the spiels. I was, giving people methylated whatever. And I think I was so focused on that I was probably missing other stuff. I distinctly remember a woman whose chief complaint at the time was brain fog and fatigue. And we did all of the 23andMe garbage. And I had her on like, a CME supplement for her methylation. And I had her on this and that for her genetics or her testing or her OAT or whatever. And I never really was able to help her, actually. And it wasn't until a few years later, because I still kind of kept in touch with her husband, who was also a patient. It occurred to me years later, some stuff that he brought up makes me think that their house has mold. Oh, that might have been it, actually.
Yeah. It
might have been mold. And here I was focusing on the fact that she had an MTHFR SNP or whatever, because that happened to be the thing I was into at the time. So, I think there's two sides of this coin that I just shared. On the one hand, there's like, if you're so hyperfixated on one thing, you might ignore or miss other things. But that could happen with anything.
Right.
Like you could hyperfixate on SIBO testing and miss a mold problem. You could hyperfixate on Lyme disease testing and miss a mold, so that's not unique to this world. But again, what I will say is that I just never got good clinical results doing this. And, you could only try something so many times and get frustrating or lackluster results. And then eventually, if you're smart and observant, you have to pivot away from that. I don't know if I was just bad at doing this kind of work or if it really just doesn't work across the board, but I strongly hypothesize that it is not the be-all, end-all that it is often painted to be. So,
yeah, well, I think you bring up a lot of really good points about getting in the weeds. I think that that's really something that a lot of our patients struggle with, is instead of focusing on the fundamentals, they focus on these in the weed things that, maybe there is a time and place to look at SNPs, but it's not like before you look at your diet, lifestyle, other major factors that could be at play. So I think it's a situation of like, a lot of times people are putting the cart before the horse when they're looking at SNPs, and they're making the SNPs the biggest problem when there's usually way more lower hanging fruit that are likely the problem and that are likely driving the symptoms. And even if you did have a SNP, correcting a lot of diet and lifestyle factors could help manage the SNP. And like, again, we've talked about with MTHFR before, you want other nutrients on board supporting methylation. It's not just about folate. I know we've talked about Chris Masterjohn's work kind of explaining that glycine, like riboflavin, all these other nutrients, if you have them on board, that MTHFR is kind of more of a nothing burger. It's like not really unless it's really extreme, like if it's homozygous or something. But even in that situation, I think it would become less of a problem if you had other nutrition on board.
Well, and to that point, and again, we're going to nod to Chris Masterjohn here. He has a video that I'm sure I referenced in either the folate or the riboflavin episode recently, but he has an episode on his YouTube channel titled, "Your MTHFR is just a riboflavin deficiency." And he talks about, and I love that he did this, he started really thinking about, well, what is it about the SNP that makes this enzyme less active? And the thing that the SNP does, look, we said we weren't going to talk about her, but here she comes again. Yeah. That jerk.
Here she goes again.
Yeah. She's a lady. What's that song?
Whoa, anyway. Whoa, she's a lady.
Thank you. Anyhow, so he looked at it and he was like, oh, the thing that the SNP does, like the modification that occurs, makes that enzyme less able to bind to its cofactor, which is riboflavin. But they have shown, and forgive me, I don't remember the nature of the study, if it was human or whatever, but he talks about it in that video. But they've shown that if you just make sure that you have enough riboflavin, like maybe above and beyond the RDA even, if you just make sure that you always have enough riboflavin, that enzyme could work totally fine, even with a SNP modification. So yeah, like, do we really need all of this methylfolate and all of these methylation protocols and B12 shots in the ass? Like, no, we probably just need to make sure we're getting enough freaking folate and B12 and riboflavin and whatever else. But people without SNPs also need those things. And so it's almost like saying, oh, if you have this SNP, then oxygen is super important for you.
Right.
It's like, well, yeah, duh, but oxygen is important for literally everyone. So why are we even talking about this? That's how I feel about so much of this stuff. Is like, yeah, if you just get adequate nutrition, which very, very, very few people do, you're good, probably.
Yeah, and I think that that's like an interesting thing when talking about SNPs is, I mean, really, I feel like anytime you limit your diet, you can maybe be more susceptible to a lot of different things. But I think one example that's interesting, like for myself, just that I kind of know this about, there's really only one SNP that I've ever seen, like symptom wise, that is relevant for me, that I'm like, oh, that's really intriguing. But even if I'm nourished, it's likely not going to be a problem for me. Like, do you know what I mean? If I'm eating a really broad, nourishing diet, it's probably not going to be a problem. But it is something I've observed across time, especially when I've had a more limited diet, that it will rear its head more. And that would be, and I forget what the exact name of it is, but it's the gene for vitamin A and like the conversion.
I thought you were gonna bring that up.
The conversion of beta carotene into the active form of vitamin A, retinol. So I like in my 23andMe, that's like red down the board. It's like I struggle with that conversion, which is common. I think it might be common for white people. I'm not sure if that's 100% true, but I know they've done studies in like the UK where maybe like 48% of the UK population has this SNP. And it doesn't mean like you can't convert any beta carotene into vitamin A, but it basically means that like you might not do well on a vegan diet that like eliminates animal foods because animal foods have active vitamin A. Yeah. So like someone maybe with my genetic profile might not do well on a vegan diet. I might start getting keratosis pilaris on my arms, which I can be a little more prone to if I get a little bit low in vitamin A. So like that's kind of like how it presents for me. I actually will get very orange hands because like my body can't convert it just gets stored very easily. Like if I even have like a week or two, if I eat like a ton of carrots or sweet potatoes, I will turn like orange. It's very strange. But it is like kind of a unique thing about me. But like, again, if I ate a nourishing, nutrient-dense diet, I likely wouldn't be depleted in vitamin A even because of my SNP. Yeah. It's just something, again, like throughout time, I've noticed when I was deficient in probably a lot of nutrients, when I was restrictive, I would get KP on my arms. And I'd be like, and I had that data and was like, oh, it's because I have this SNP. And it's like, that might make, right. Well, it's sort of a scenario of I'm already a little susceptible to that genetically. And I think that that's probably the best way to maybe look at SNPs is like, you could be susceptible to things based on your SNP, but it still doesn't change the fact that like, if you're nourished, you probably won't be a problem.
Yeah. Well, and this is another example, maybe, where if you just did the unsexy, basic, fundamental, foundational health promoting stuff, then the SNPs probably don't matter all that much, right? So like MTHFR probably doesn't matter if you have a nourishing diet and you get enough of all of your B vitamins, including but not limited to folate. But like anybody and everybody should be doing that anyway. So that's not really rocket science. That's not specific to MTHFR. And similarly here, it's like, you know, again, maybe don't go full vegan. Well,
right.
We don't recommend that anyway, because then you're going to be susceptible to other nutrient deficiencies as well. Or like, you know, maybe you would do well with like a cod liver supplement or eating some beef liver once a week or whatever. But again, like most people would benefit from those things. Right. So it's not really specific to like this BCMO, you know, beta carotene SNP necessarily. It's just like, oh yeah, you see that on the broader internet as something that's really health promoting for anybody. So do you really need a protocol?
Well, and again, like I think too, it's one of those things where like you would still want to see if it's impacting you in real life, because I feel like a lot of these SNPs, there's so many theories around them. And sometimes there's studies that show like it enhances the enzyme, and then some studies shows that it like hinders it. I think that that's like the CBS gene is another one that like I think there's a lot of confusion about, where like some people are avoiding like sulfur in their diet, and I think they have no real reason to. Like they seem to do fine with sulfur. Yeah, that it's not like they're having sulfur buildup or anything like odd on their labs or anything like that. You know what I mean?
Well, and if I could share on that one, so that's one of the ones that I have read down the line.
I have some yellow in the sulfur, but not red.
No, I've got, I forget, because again, this is like a decade ago that I was doing a lot of the stuff, but God, I felt old in that moment. Like saying like, oh, I was doing this in my practice a decade ago. Oh my God. But I remember looking at my own stuff. And this actually, for me, this was confirmed when I did there's like a methylation panel through Genova, and they include some SNP testing as part of that. And I will say sometimes people throw shade at like 23andMe, for example, because it might not be perfectly accurate. I will say out of like the 8 or 12 SNPs that Genova tested on that methylation panel, it did line up perfectly with 23andMe for me personally.
Yeah.
But I had like all of the CBS SNPs, and that, if you follow kind of conventional internet wisdom, you would think, I can't do N-acetylcysteine. I maybe can't do high sulfur foods. I'm going to get like all these wonky symptoms. I'm going to have low glutathione, etc. And literally none of that has been true for me. Like I can pound N-acetylcysteine like a boss.
Yeah.
Like a boss.
You do well with it. Like you feel good on it.
Well, I feel fine on it. But the funny thing is, years ago, I did see low glutathione, like just barely out of the range on the Genova test on the NutriEval. I think it was like 700 or something. And I think that's right on the cusp of like what they mark as the yellow range for them. But I did see low glutathione, and I did a trial for like a year or something of taking N-acetylcysteine every day. And then I repeated the NutriEval, and my glutathione went up to where it ought to be. But that was kind of around the same time that I got more and more into Chronometer. And then I looked back at my data on Chronometer and I realized, out of all the amino acids, the one amino acid that I do not consume enough of is cysteine.
Right. Whoops.
Whoopsie daisy. And again, like I could have figured that out with a $5 per month Chronometer subscription. I did not have to do 2 $380 NutriEval tests on myself. So what's that? So 380 plus 380, like $760 that I spent on testing and repeat testing to figure out something that Chronometer could have told me for free or cheap.
Yeah.
Oh, well, it is what it is. And that was at a time when I was coming off of a dairy-free diet for 10 years. So I think that was a big part of it. And also, I am a recovering vegetarian. I was a vegetarian for 11 years of my life, especially my formative, teenage and early 20 years when I was learning to cook. And if I'm not mindful, I will kind of default skew low on my protein, acknowledging too, like I'm a giant, so I need probably more protein than a lot of you all do. But so I was coming off of a dairy-free, relatively protein deficient diet at that time where, I was like, for my stature, my frame, I probably need about 100 grams of protein. And I was probably naturally falling in like the 70 to 80 range.
Yeah.
So like it wasn't atrocious, but it wasn't good either. And again, no dairy, which has cysteine. So all I really needed to do was increase my protein and reintroduce dairy again. And now I get cysteine. And again, I could have figured this out with Chronometer, theoretically. But anyway, my rambling point is I could do N-acetylcysteine. I have proven at least once that it will raise my glutathione when it's low. And I could do high sulfur containing foods. I've never had a problem taking supplemental glutathione or supplemental NAC. And I could pound it, like when I get sick, I'll take like 2 or 3 500 milligram capsules 3 times a day. Like I could take a ton of it and feel fine. But again, my SNPs would tell you a different story, and I might be missing out on this nutrient that I really, really need to make glutathione if I only listen to the SNPs.
Right.
So.
Yeah, no, it's true. And again, I think, I feel like I'm going back to MTHFR again, but like, even if you were like having trouble methylating or something, like that could show up on a lab as well. Like that could show up on homocysteine potentially, like if your homocysteine's high, or like even some of your blood work, like like a CBC. Sorry, homocysteine is blood work, but like a CBC or like really kind of sometimes basic blood work can show up some squirreliness, and or you could get folate run. Like some of these things kind of run to see like how your methylation's running, like some indicators on your nutritional status for certain things that are pretty cheap. even if you wanted a little bit of testing, that could actually tell you what's happening in the body versus like what your genes are doing, because genes can also, I remember listening to a nutrigenomics guy on Chris Kresser's podcast, and he was really interesting because he was the first guy that was basically said like, we don't even know if genes are turned on or not. So he was basically saying like, we probably need to slow our roll on like how much we're putting stock in nutrigenomics, because we can't really tell what's turned on or not. And like, there's so much more to it than just like what on paper you're looking like. And there's probably a lot of genes we don't even understand.
Tons.
And mechanisms that we don't get. So like, maybe your CBS is running slow, but there's some other sulfur enzyme that's important that we don't even know about. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's just a lot we don't understand about the body. But I think like if you see something maybe in labs, it's a little bit more definitive. Like I was telling Nikki that recently I had a patient with an elevation in homocysteine. So we're like, oh, he's probably not methylating well. What's going on? And we could kind of diagnose that he had low folate. We don't know anything about his SNPs or anything like that.
No, but you saw the low folate on blood work from like LabCorp or Quest or whatever, right?
So I'm like, okay, we definitely need to support like methylation. I can actually see that like this is off versus like some theoretical idea that you have to have like tons of folate or something, and then you're taking like tons of methylated folate when you might not need it. Yeah.
Well, and again, like there are two phrases that I've heard in regards to this kind of testing. One of them I like, the other one I strongly dislike, but I'm going to share it anyway because I think it paints a picture. One of them is just that genes are not your destiny. And I like that one. I think that clicks, that resonates. I like the vibe, if you will. The other one is genes load the gun, lifestyle pulls the trigger. Now, I don't love that expression, but I think it does paint this picture of like all of us are prone to, like theoretically, genetically, we might be more prone to a whole host of different things. How many of those actually get a chance to manifest is the question. And this is true for even overt diseases at times. So for example, the celiac genes, what is it? Like something akin to 40% of Caucasian people have at least one celiac gene.
Yeah.
But only 1% or 2% of the general population goes on to develop actual overt celiac disease.
Right.
So what's happening with that 38%? Right? Like, or whatever the number ends up being. Because I will say one number I was referencing Caucasian people, the other number I was referencing the broader population. So the numbers are going to, anyway, transparency in math. But anyway, like there's a good chunk of people walking around with celiac genes, but they do not have celiac disease and they never will develop celiac disease. So what is the difference between those people and the people who actually get the disease?
Right.
That's what we need to be really looking at. Yeah, it could be useful to do genetic testing and just screen it out. You know, celiac testing could be a good first line thing. If you go to the doctor and you have tummy problems and they just want to do a really quick and dirty screener to see, if you come back and you don't have a celiac gene, there's like 0.0% chance that you're going to have celiac disease.
Right.
If it comes back and you have the celiac gene, it's not diagnostic, but it does open that up as a possibility for you. And so in that sense, genetic testing could be just like a quick, dirty, cheap, easy thing that we test to just screen for the possibility. But, you know, it's funny. I've shared before on here, I'm pretty sure I'm a celiac. Again, I'm self-diagnosed. So I have never been told by like a GI doctor from an endoscopy that I for sure have celiac disease. But when I was experimenting with my diet a lot and I was working on my gut healing journey, I did testing. And the panel that I did was like a gluten sensitivity panel, but it also had the celiac antibodies on that panel. It was one of the Cyrex tests. And the transglutaminase celiac antibodies were elevated on that Cyrex test. So pretty like, yeah, I never confirmed, like I never looked to see like, is Cyrex going to line up with what LabCorp says, for example?
Yeah.
Like I didn't do a confirmatory test with a more standard lab. And I did not go the extra step of doing the endoscopy and confirming and whatever. But I have reasonably good reason to suspect that I really have celiac disease. And I was looking at one of these big, you know, genetic SNP figure it out platforms. You know, you upload your 23andMe and then it spits out all these cool reports at you and you get to
what was it, like DNA Genie or something like that? Or
there's so many. I don't want to name names on here, but like there's again, Livwellio is one that I used historically when I was doing a lot of this stuff. There's Genetic Genie, there's Self Decode, there's I feel like there's another big one that I'm missing. Anyway, there's a bunch of these out there, but just for funsies, I was looking at one of these other platforms and I plugged in my 23andMe. And funny enough, it says that I have typical risk or typical likelihood for celiac disease. I'm like, okay, like I'm pretty sure I have it.
Right.
I don't know. Like this was kind of a nothing burger for me. It didn't say like, oh man, you're super likely to have this.
Right.
So this was an instance where the genetic testing kind of missed out on something that actually could be more relevant for me.
Right.
But, you know, I probably inherited one celiac gene from my mom's side of the family. And having one copy of one celiac gene, they're like, oh yeah, that's like normal average stuff for a Caucasian chick. Like, yeah,
that's basic
average.
B stuff.
Yeah. Versus if I had like one copy from each parent.
Yeah, like a homozygous situation.
Yeah, then they maybe would be like, whoa, increased risk. But, you know, meanwhile, it says that I'm at high risk of all of these things that I do not have. And, you know, so like I'm looking at the gut health one. And honest to God, I don't know how they come up with some of this stuff. Because I only uploaded my 23andMe and I filled out a very short like symptom-based questionnaire, like symptom and demographic questionnaire. So I, for the life of me, can't tell you how they got some of the stuff. I think it's kind of horse manure. But for example, okay, more likely to have constipation, okay, but also more likely to have flatulence, bloating, intestinal obstruction, rectal prolapse, anal fissures, stomach cancer, peptic ulcers, H. pylori. How the F would you determine genetically that I'm more likely to have an infection? Anyway, stomach pain, stomach inflammation, gastrointestinal infection. I'm sorry, do you know where I'm like traveling and camping to? Do you know if I'm going to India and picking up some weird stuff or like Tibet?
Maybe they're spying on you.
You know, like, no, I don't see how.
It also makes me nervous that they do this shit. And I think that this is something that, you know, people are a little fearful of, is them using that like DNA for the insurance companies to be like, oh, you're at higher risk for this. Have you heard of that before?
No, but I could imagine.
So I know that there's been people that have talked about how like, oh, they don't want their DNA being out there. For one reason, it could be potentially used by insurance companies to like maybe jack up your rate or something if you're at a high risk, or if insurance companies start doing this kind of stuff where they're like asking you to give DNA.
Okay. I mean, like, but how many times have you gotten your blood drawn in your entire life?
Right.
Like, if your insurance company wants your DNA, they could get it probably pretty easily.
Right.
I'm just saying. Like, next time you go to the hospital or LabCorp, they could just like whisper to the technician, hey, take out like a teeny bit more for us.
Oh my gosh.
So, but here's something I will say on that note really quickly. I remember for many years people saying that they didn't trust 23andMe, for example. And yeah, they didn't want their DNA to be leaked or whatever. And I kind of get that. I'm not super worried about it personally, but I can kind of understand the sentiment. But I went into it knowing, oh yeah, this could be leaked. I think the difference is I'm not overly confident that the information won't be leaked. I'm just not confident that anybody could do anything like super malicious or bad with my information if it does get leaked. Like, okay, like somebody's going to know that I have average risk for celiac disease and I have some MTHFR SNPs, like whoop-de-frickin' do. I don't know. And so that's the difference. But I feel like I feel the same way now about AI.
Right.
Where there's like casual use of AI. That's one thing. But people are plugging in blood tests and GI maps and test results into AI and getting protocols from AI. That terrifies me. And like, you don't know what ChatGPT is going to do with your stool test report and send it out into the ether, feed it back to the GI map people. I don't know. Like, you don't know what it's going to do with it. But more importantly, as a course creator, I know a lot of people now who have an online course or program or coaching thing, and they upload all of their shit into an AI bot, and then they embed the bot into their course. And they're like, ooh, now you have a 24/7 trained AI, and it's trained on all of my methods, all of my stuff. And therefore, you could get coaching 24/7, and then it like reduces the administrative burden, and it reduces the need for live Q&A and like human support, and it can cut down your hours. And part of me as a business owner is like, wow, that's really brilliant. But a bigger part of me is like, I'm not going to willingly give away my intellectual property and train a bot to replace me.
Yeah.
That seems like a bad idea from like a business livelihood standpoint. Also, I don't know if it's going to be as good as me. What if the bot gives wrong information or bad coaching? But anyway, I feel very similar with AI right now, where people are like, oh, I'm going to plug in all my stuff into AI. Right. And I'm like, I don't trust that at all.
Yeah.
And the companies are like, oh, it's cool. We won't leak it at all. It's totally secure. Yeah. Pinky promise. And I'm like, but is it secure?
Right.
Because 23andMe said that their stuff was super duper secure at the time. And now 23andMe stuff has been leaked numerous times, I think, if I'm remembering correctly. So I'm like, just because the company says, oh, super promise, bestie, it's secure.
Right.
We promise. Like,
we're not going to sell your data.
That doesn't mean, well, and like, we're not going to intentionally sell your data is different from a hacker getting in and getting your data.
Well, that's true.
Too. And that's more what I worry about. Like, I don't think that MindPal or whatever is going to sell my FODMAP Freedom course necessarily, but I do think that hackers could get it someday, or like there's some backdoor of the internet.
Yeah.
Anyway, I digress. I don't trust AI. I'm an old curmudgeon. That's my point. But going back to the things that I'm apparently more prone to, says we actually didn't finish that role. Appendicitis, stomach inflammation, food allergies, alcohol sensitivity, which is interesting. Here's one though, gut microbiome diversity. I'm predisposed to lower gut microbiome diversity. How would you know that? Like, how would you know that based on anything? And they actually give levels, like typical levels of Bifidobacteria bifidum. How the fuck do you know that? I only gave you my 23andMe and did a brief symptom and demographic thing. And it's saying I probably am predisposed to higher levels of Bifido longum and Bifido breve. Where the F are you getting that from?
Right.
And it says like, okay, I am a FUT2 secretor and I know the role of like FUT2 with Bifido. But I'll tell you, like, the Bifido thing in particular does not track with any of the dozens of stool tests I've done in my life.
Right.
So it makes me nervous that people could see something like this and then they're like, oh, this is why I have constipation, because I'm genetically like doomed to have it. And now I need to do the MTHFR stuff or something. And it's like,
right.
I don't think that's true.
Yeah. I mean, the FUT2 stuff too, like that gets brought up. That's been brought up to me a number of times where they're like, well, I'm just this. And it's like, you're never just that. I feel like, and people can do that for other things too. You know, I've had people that will say like, you know, what's the connective tissue disorder? I can't think of it now.
Oh, like Ehlers-Danlos?
Yeah. Oh, I have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. I'm screwed. It's like, but I think that that's the attitude with the genes too. It's like, oh, I'm FUT2, or like I'm a non-secretor. I'm screwed. It's like,
there's no point feeding Bifido.
Right.
Because
like,
it won't work for me anyway. And it's like,
right.
But how do you know until you try?
Well, I think that this is something to think about. It's just like the story that you're telling yourself and your mindset and your mentality. Like, most of the time, the way genes are presented is like you're stuck with these genes, like there's nothing you can do. Maybe again, like there could be some interventions that might be helpful based on your genetics. So I'm not going to say like that this couldn't be a thing, but it's so far down the line of things that you can try. And again, like viewing it in the sense of like, I'm doomed because of my genes is the wrong way to look at most situations in general, but especially with what we know and don't know about all this genetic, all these SNPs. Like, I just feel like there's so much we don't know. And even what we do know, like, I don't think people are screwed if they have like weird comp SNPs or, even for me, like a squirrely vitamin A, like that doesn't mean I'm screwed. It means I need to get my vitamin A in from maybe multiple sources, like most people would if you're eating if you're focusing on eating a nutrient dense diet.
Well, and to that point, perhaps I was just thinking about this as you were talking. I think that DNA is not with this world. When we're talking about SNPs and this kind of world, not necessarily overt genetic disease, right? Like if you have maple syrup urine disease or like one of those funky,
like they're going to be diagnosed as a baby, basically.
Yeah, like diseases of what do they
inborn,
call it?
Like metabolism.
Inborn errors of metabolism. If there's something like that, then you absolutely need to work with that to the degree that you can. But I'm talking about like you got to adulthood or close to adulthood and somebody did like a 23andMe or a SNP or a methylation panel on you. And now they're making all of these deductions because of the SNPs that you carry. I think stuff like that is, in my opinion, never going to show you where you are doomed. I think what that could show you is where you need to work your ass off a little bit more, right? So again, all people should be sleeping, managing stress, moving their body, getting vitamin D, having social connection, eating enough protein, eating enough B vitamins, eating enough vitamin A or whatever. All of us should be doing that. But if you have a BCMO SNP or multiple BCMO SNPs, maybe you need to super consider like beef liver or cod liver or getting, eggs or animal foods that contain vitamin A. And you super need to consider not doing a vegan diet, right? Like good advice for anybody, but more important for you. So that's maybe where you focus. And similarly, if somebody has MTHFR SNPs like I do, maybe I need to be super ultra mega careful to get enough of my B vitamins. Everybody should, but that's where maybe you work your ass off a little bit more because you don't have that luxury of being a bit riboflavin deficient.
Well, and especially if you've seen on blood work historically that maybe you like have a high homocysteine or like exhibit some signs of like low B vitamins too.
Yeah.
I think that gives more credibility to the genetic side of things. But yeah, I think we work with so many people that are just basically malnourished. So like if you get stuck up on these genes and you're under eating by like 800 calories a day, it's like this genetic thing is probably so like a small part of the bigger issue, and you want to focus on the big pieces first and then kind of get to the nitty-gritty.
Yeah. Well, and I will make a case for another thing that's popped up on this testing that I'm pretty sure is accurate for me too. And again, I'm going to paint it with the brush of your genes might be able to show you where you need to work extra hard.
Right.
And it's not an, oh my God, I'm doomed thing. So I've seen now across 2 tests that I have one of the Alzheimer's genes. So the ApoE was 4, I think. ApoE4, I have a 3 and I have a 4. I'm pretty, well, actually, no, I'm sorry. I'm positive it came from my dad's side. My paternal grandmother had Alzheimer's. So we have a diagnosis on that side. But number 2, I actually did a 23andMe on my mom years ago. And I like linked them, inside 23andMe. And I looked at all of her information in the same depth that I looked at my information. And I could tell she does not have a Alzheimer's gene on her side. She's 3-3. I'm 3-4. So the 4 had to come from my dad's side.
Yeah.
I will share though, couplefold. To me, this doesn't mean, oh my God, I'm doomed. I don't live day to day in fear of Alzheimer's disease. But I do want to be careful of my brain, maybe even more so than the average person. So I don't like roller coasters anyway, but if I did, I would choose to not go on roller coasters, right? And like potentially get concussion or whiplash from something like that. I would maybe think twice about contact sports where there's tackling and headbutting and that sort of stuff to protect from concussions and whiplash. I want to make sure that I'm getting enough nutrients that my brain needs. I am super anal about getting enough sleep. Like, one of the major reasons why we only have one child is because my husband and I value sleep way too much, and we don't want to risk having another kid and having it be a bad sleeper. Like, that's one of the big deciding factors for us. But also, I was telling somebody recently, I would even, to some degree, I would sacrifice nutrition a little bit in favor of getting better sleep. Like, that's how seriously I take sleep. I would rather have a protein bar for my breakfast and run up to my first meeting of the day than skimp out on sleep. Because I know sleep is super freaking important for the brain. And, so it's like, I have this way back in my brain, kind of meta full circle moment. I have this information in the back recesses of my mind informing some of my decision making. And I know that I need to do more stuff that's good for my brain because I don't want that gene to become my destiny. I don't want to go down that path. But I will say, I have not told my dad any of this, and I probably will not do so, because the same exact information that motivates me and tells me this is where I need to work, this is something that I could use as a scaffolding, that same exact information would doom him. Yeah. He saw his mother, slowly fade away with Alzheimer's. He lives in fear of it. He's been terrified of Alzheimer's for decades. He talks about how scared he is of that. And he's not a super health conscious person. So I do worry about him in that regard. But I know for sure the thing that motivates me would absolutely crush him. And it would be a bad thing for him to have that knowledge. So I try to help him as much as I can. And both of my parents for that matter, just because I'm a loving daughter and I want what's best for them, but I'm not going to tell him.
Yeah. And I would think unfortunately that your dad kind of knows, right? Like if his mom passed away from Alzheimer's, typically that would lead him to maybe believe that he's at a higher risk, but it being on paper,
I feel like his fear.
Yeah. Just really could become in his brain, a self-fulfilling prophecy of oh no, I'm doomed by this, and this is going to be my fate. And it's not the case. Just because you have a higher risk doesn't mean it's going to happen. And I think, again, a lot of our patients that might struggle with more anxiety, these sorts of tests could have very similar effects where it's oh no, I'm consumed by the doubts I have around this nutrient or the doubts I have around this risk. And
I have to dial in the supplements just perfectly. And I'm terrified to go off of any of my supplements.
Yeah. And I think that's I think sometimes you can get people that are orthorexic based off these types of tests where it's ooh, I have a high risk of cardiovascular disease. I'm going to eliminate all saturated fat from my diet. I'm going to eliminate all animal foods. I'm going to go full vegan. I think that's where you can get into real trouble with that kind of stuff. And it's okay, there's so many health promoting things that you could do for cardiovascular disease that doesn't involve going full vegan.
Yeah. Well, and again, there are things that I could do for Alzheimer's prevention. Sorry. I think that's the first or second occurrence on this podcast ever. an alarm went off. How rude. How rude of me. Sorry. Let me make sure it's disabled because I think it's going to go off again. Yeah, let's just turn that off. Sorry about that, guys. Yeah, there's so much that you could do, but something that I maybe want to start wrapping us up with here is you kind of touched on this very slightly, or you came close enough to it that it sprung this in my brain when I was talking about all of the things that I'm theoretically more susceptible to. Most of it, by the way, almost all of which I do not have and never have had. The one and only thing, the two items from that big list that actually seem to apply is if I'm not careful about my self-care, I skew a little bit more to constipation. So that feels maybe potentially a little bit accurate for me. The other one is I have seen low diversity on my stool testing, but I was also a product of the 80s and 90s. And I was the ear infection kid turned sinus infection adult. And I had IV, PICC line antibiotics for 6 weeks for Lyme disease. I've had a crap ton of antibiotics in my lifetime. That explains the diversity thing way more than this 23andMe garbage would. Right? So that's true, but I think it's true for a different reason. So the one and only thing that really holds true, maybe as it pertains to genetics very loosely, although maybe pertaining to the diversity piece too, is the constipation piece. But all of that other stuff, H. pylori, stomach pain, stomach cancer, bloating, whatever else, none of the rest of that has been true for me, at least up until this point at 39. But I think when we were around that part of the conversation, you made me think, this feels very much like stool testing does in a way, where we maybe need to slow our roll on how gung-ho we are with this type of testing and making protocols based on this testing. And, there's the conventional wisdom of the internet. There's the culture of the internet and the culture of functional medicine, which is problematic, where there are practitioners who do this testing on every single person. You got the Ben Lynch types of the world, right? There's so many people who overstate the importance of this kind of testing, just like there are people who overstate the importance of doing a GI map or an OAT or whatever in the functional space. But where research, real research actually is, and where our kind of academic understanding of this topic actually is that we're in our infancy of understanding any of this. How the genes work and the interplay between genetics and environment, we understand 0.1% of that body of science probably. And similarly with the microbiome and stool testing, it's something like 80% of the microbiome can't be cultured and therefore is nearly impossible to study. And then 50% of the microbes in the gut, the human gut, haven't even been named yet. I'm pretty sure those are the stats I've heard. 50% don't even have a name. Therefore, there's sure as hell not research on some no-name, know-nothing bacteria, right?
Yeah.
And we know this little minuscule amount, but there are plenty of for-profit companies like Diagnostic Solutions, the maker of the GI map, or, the Gut Zoomer people, Vibrant America. There are tons of for-profit commercial companies that are all too happy to take your money and tell you that these tests hold all of the answers that you could ever wish for. And it's steaming hot garbage. The promise, certain tests, GI map is also steaming hot garbage. But the promise that they make that is way too grandiose is what I'm saying is actually garbage. Right. But yeah, we have to take these tools and really take them with an enormous, enormous grain of salt. But I don't see that happening usually. People take it as gospel and they run with it, and then they build these wild protocols off of it. And then they wonder why they're stuck. And it's sad.
It is what it is.
Amy, I feel like we need to wrap on something slightly happier. What can we tell the good people at home? Oh, do we want to reveal what our families were for Halloween? Because we're now recording after Halloween.
Yeah. I wasn't anything. I was just myself. But my daughters were Ariel and Flounder. Cece wanted me to be Ursula, but I didn't feel like buying the costume. And then she wanted Armand to be a pig, which he was offended by. He's like, Mom's Ursula, Frankie's Flounder, I, as in Cece, I'm gonna be Ariel, and Dad's the pig. So he was
but there's no pig in that movie, right? Like, how does that track?
That's why Armand was offended.
Yeah, I'd be a little offended too.
Yeah.
They were very cute. I saw, because we're Facebook friends. So yes. I got to see the pictures on Facebook and they were adorable. I especially loved that it was the Flounder. The Flounder edition was a really nice touch. I'm surprised she kept her little hat on, her little hood, I guess. It wasn't like a total hood. It was sort of a hat. And then it kind of it was stuck together. It was hilarious and adorable. Very cute. So for us, Jess went as Hermione Granger. She was going to be Rumi from K-pop Demon Hunters. And I was already like, ooh, I've got to learn that hairdo.
Yeah.
Which I think I could have done, actually. But she changed her mind like a week and a half before Halloween. She was like, you know what, Mom? I think I'm going to be Hermione after all, which was her original idea.
Yeah.
So luckily, we had all of the accoutrement to go with that, because we had been planning for a Hermione costume for most of the year. And we went and did Universal in January of this year. So we had, the legit Hogwarts robe and whatever else. So she went as Hermione, which was perfect because she has Hermione Granger's hair from the first Harry Potter movie. The only difference is Jess does not have bangs, but whatever. Nobody was like fact checking us that hard out there on Halloween night. So it was okay. My husband has the same costume that he occasionally busts out for like a Halloween party. So he put it on for maybe 5 minutes at a Halloween party and then called it good. He has a black sheet and then a little face mask that he holds up in front of his face. So he is No Face from Spirited Away.
Oh, yeah.
So
nice.
He was holding it like on a stick in front of him.
Cool.
So that was fun. And then I was Dr. Han from K-pop Demon Hunters. So I looked like a generic doctor because I just had on a white coat and a, short men's hairdo wig, but I carried around tonics that were juice boxes with a label that I made for them. And I handed them out to anybody who was dressed up like they were from K-pop Demon Hunters.
Love it.
I was handing out tonics. And then of course, my parents stole the show yet again as the Amazon delivery crew, complete with a truck that is fitted to go over my mom's electric scooter or electric wheelchair. And she hands out full-size candy bars. So she was amazing. A baller for the third year in a row. And I don't even mind that she steals the show every single year because it's such a joy watching them make their deliveries and hand out candy bars. So
I love it.
That's it. But all right. So we ended on something fun. That's all the fun you get, guys. But go forth, take testing, especially this kind of testing, with a grain of salt. And we will see you right back here for another rip-roaring episode of the IBS Freedom Podcast before you know what's what.